Evelyn to Philip, July 17th, 1944. Darling Phil, today I received the kind of letter I like to receive from you. Yours of 9 through 10 July, 17 pages long. Consequently, I thought of you constantly all day and wasn't really any good for anything. I thought back to that night when you left me, Mom, and Tante Shuj to go with Jack, and suddenly I became very, very lonesome. I've thought of that night often and thought to myself, if only we had known we would be separated so long, we'd have made sure to be together that night. But I'm sure we'll be together all the nights to come. I missed you so much that night, just as I have missed you all year long. I shall call Dot when I'm finished and read her the passage intended for her. Yes, dear, my posture was poor, but I have made efforts in that connection since you left. I'm unusually conscious about it anymore, and I sincerely hope you'll find me improved. When you get to talking about what we'll do the first few weeks when you get back, it sounds almost unbelievable. I do think I should like to go to New York and stay at room 1777, the New Yorker, for a few days to relive our never-to-be-forgotten honeymoon. Just a few days of New York would be enough, and then I'd like to go up to a mountain or camp resort for a week or two to indulge in sports, bathe. Perhaps you could teach me to really swim this time. And then I think I should like to take that boat ride you once took on your way back from Phoenicia. You know something, sweetness? I really don't care if we stay here at 4906, as long as you're here. I was wondering who would care for Adele when we left, because I don't think I'd care to take her with us for the first week at page 2 least. Oh, we'll arrange everything to perfection when the time comes. I'm sure of that. Oh, to look at you, to touch you, to feel you, to kiss you. You're right when you say you can remold me. I always did like the way you molded, honey. I'm glad you're getting confidence in your ability to write efficiently, for when you have that, half the battle will be won. I don't know if you've read the Bill of Rights for GIs thoroughly, sweet, but if you did, you may have noted that it really doesn't provide you with the opportunity to get schooling of any sort. This phase of opportunity seems to be reserved for those in the under 25 group. Do you think there is any possibility of getting schooling in journalism after the war? My free Saturdays are not so free. I have Adele to care for, remember? And then I have an opportunity to catch up on all those little things I don't have time for during the week, like pressing, writing, cleaning, etc. Oh, I do some of it in the mornings, but I don't have sufficient time to get any real work completed. Yesterday afternoon, my dad, Adele, and I went out to see the Hershkovitzes. Adele played with Stevie, who is quite a cutie, looking more like a girl than a boy with his large blonde curls and big blue eyes. He's the world's biggest demon at 14 months. He's got the record of getting out of playpen, crib, carriage, and whatnot. He climbs everything and anything, and you never know where you'll find him next. He is such a problem that Esther has decided to quit working and relieve her overtaxed mother. Esther is making $50 per week, and during the next 13 weeks will make $56. She will quit her job in October. George looks fine and is private first class. He is a clerk typist too, but is attached to intelligence, which makes his work a big, big secret. He asked all about you. My cousin Bella is going steady with a fellow that was discharged from the army, and undoubtedly it will be wedding bells for them in page 3, the very near future. Belle looks a million these days. She also mentioned that her place is making more expensive dresses for Adele these days that are gorgeous, wholesaling at $2 and selling for around $4. Most of the ladies around here think Adele has a lovely wardrobe, especially dresses, and I intend to keep up that rep if Belle can get me gorgeous dresses. Like Sarah says, you can dress up an ugly child. Is there such a thing? To make it look pretty, but when you dress up a good-looking child, well, then you've got a doll. How true, how true. On second thought, it's not always true for a lot, depends on the build of a child, as well as a grown-up when it comes to clothes. I do know that Adele looks like a regular doll from the store when she's dressed up, and you'd positively eat her up like I do often. I love the way she says "Daddy, home," screwing her mouth up to say the home so that she looks very much as if she were about to whistle. When asked what she will do to you, she hugs herself and blows a kiss. Yes, dear, I'm sure she'll know you, for she catches on to things quickly, especially things she likes. Every night now we have a new practice. I always try to have a few pennies and change so that she may throw them in the penny bank. Usually I don't have very many, so I empty the bank and let her refill it with the pennies. Mom went to Brown's Mills for an indefinite period tonight with Al. I kept urging her to go, but she didn't want to leave Goldie alone, saying it would be too much for Goldie. She changed her mind yesterday as Ethel called from Brown's Mills and insisted that she come out. Pauline called yesterday to tell us that Uncle Sam thought of something new to aid the building, page 4 of ships, and the patent for whatever he thought of passed. He was supposed to go to the office this morning about it, so we'll let you know more about it when I do. I understand Phil is now in the medical corps and can't contact Em, as she goes down the shore for weekends and is never home when I call. I worked as per usual today. Oh yes, we had dinner at my aunt's and left shortly afterward, going along with Esther and George. We took the Lehigh car and they departed at Broad for the North Philly station while we rode down to 8th to catch the 47. My cousin Meyer was president of his class at college and made quite a name for himself. He worked like a dog night and day, holding down a job at the same time to keep going, and did it for 3 years. He looked like a shadow of his former self in the pictures she showed me. Naturally, my aunt is broken up about it, wishing very much that he had had some time to himself after 3 hard years before going into the army. When we got home, I bathed and put Adele to bed and proceeded to wash and press till 11:30 before hitting the hay. I awoke at 7 and felt lousy all day long, 'cause I'm due most any day now. The blues had me in their grip all day long. Oh, baby mine, I love you so much. I kept wanting you all day long, and after I reported that I had been doing so nicely sexually. I had a letter from Cy, and he does sound better in this letter. He asked for your address, that he might drop you a line. He also requested a picture of Adele and myself. He said the orders and regulations sound terribly silly at times, but that he was getting used to everything and anything. Your June bond came this morning, too. That brings our maturity value of bonds up to $625. I have high hopes of reaching 1,000 before 1945 rings in, and then we'll have something to buy a home with, if ever we decide to buy. And now, dearly beloved, I must sign off, as sleep is very important when you have a big day before you. I am and always will be your Ev. Philip to Evelyn, 17 July 1944. Sweetheart, tonight I am CQ, so I am staying in for a change. Last night, as you know, I went into town again with Klein. It was another lovely evening, and the first really warm one we've had this year. Not uncomfortably hot like those you tell me you are experiencing back home, but warm enough to make me wish I could have removed my blouse. So pretty was the weather, in fact, that we were unwilling to shut ourselves up in a cinema. Instead, we decided to explore Castle Park. Remember the old castle I told you about? Well, the park is the grounds surrounding it, and very pretty grounds at that. It is a fairly large park, containing a playground for the youngsters, a bandstand, very attractive flower gardens, a small lake, and a ball field. It was Sunday evening, and everyone was decked out in his finest. A military band held forth on the bandstand and played for the edification of a large crowd who lolled about on the clean green grass all over the place. There were many, many uniforms in evidence, but the atmosphere and aspect of the place made the war seem an unhappy dream nevertheless. Klein and I listened to the band a while, and then strolled down to the lake, where we encountered the two older ladies of the D Menage. I'm not sure as to the relationship, but I think one of the ladies is either Mr. or Mrs. D's mother. We spent a half hour or so with them, and then decided to explore further. We followed a cool wooded trail until we were weary of the walking. Klein suggested we find a pub and drink a few beers. After walking about the town for another half hour, we managed to find one that was still open. The pub was crowded, and the habitués, especially the females, I use the appellation advisedly, hesitating to dignify them with the title of ladies, were a common and boisterous lot. Invariably, this particular spectacle depresses and even sickens me. So after we downed our light, I told Klein we were getting the hell out of there. He didn't mind because it was stifling in the crowded pub. Outside it was much cooler, and the clean, sweet breeze was as welcome and exhilarating as a lover's kiss by contrast. We then returned to the park, which was less crowded now that the concert was over. We picked out a nice shady spot on a grassy slope, divested ourselves of our caps and blouses, and took the closest thing to a siesta I have enjoyed in years. My thoughts at the time, of course, were of home and you, dearest, and how much happier I would have been if you were close by with the pumpkin playing about. However, I was weary from all the walking and fell off into a doze right in the middle of my daydreaming. We were awakened by the call of the gatekeeper a short time later. There is a 10 o'clock curfew in the park. We still had an hour to kill, so we walked over to the D's place. This time, all the family were at home, and some of the neighbors were visiting too. Klein wasted no time going into his act. He made overtures to Mrs. D, made heroic attempts to get at Fagala, who had ensconced herself in a corner behind the table, a chair, and the piano. It was a picnic, Ev. Klein went after the imperturbable Fay as though she were protected within the walls of a fort, making exaggerated efforts to clear the barriers of the table and chairs, which the little bird kept putting in his path. Through it all, Klein kept exhorting her in the most endearing terms, ardently professing his love and generally presenting the appearance of a long-famished lover. At each fresh outburst, everyone went into gales of laughter. Even Fay had all she could do to keep a straight face. It may sound silly to you as I write it, sweet, but it was really very funny, and I laughed just as hard as the rest of them. Klein has a real flair for comedy, and even though I've seen him perform many times, and his act seldom varies, I still find him funny. The D's, as I have already informed you, are a fun-loving and carefree bunch, and it was never better illustrated than it was last night. Mr. D, the eldest, is full of the devil. First he accompanied himself on the guitar while he sang a few suggestive ditties, leaving out the more risque portions and substituting tum-diddy-um-tum. However, the effect was most gratifying, and everyone enjoyed the performance. Then he jitterbugged with Klein while Fay beat out In the Mood on the accordion, but they were both laughing so hard all the while that they were soon exhausted. Mrs. D then teamed up for a jitterbug session with Klein. This went okay until Klein attempted to toss her around. Mrs. D only weighs a few pounds less than a long ton, so you can imagine how far he succeeded in this particular endeavor. However, his quasi-serious attempts to lift her had us all in stitches, and so it went, one big laugh after another, and everyone having a hell of a good time. You may be wondering, Chippy, just what your loving spouse contributed to the proceedings. Or do you know by now that he is strictly a spectator at this sort of a party? It irks me, Ev, that I can't get over my self-consciousness. But such, unfortunately, is the case. After the usual glass of tea and cakes, it was time to go. As a matter of fact, we had to sprint to get to the parking lot before the MPs should tack a ticket onto the bus. We made it just as a nearby belfry was tolling out 11 o'clock. We picked up the officers at the Officers Club and headed back to camp, Klein, as per usual, singing most of the way. Truly, Ev, there is never a dull moment with Klein as in the vicinity. If he isn't singing, he's dancing or mugging or recounting all the dirty details of one of his more lurid adventures. What a guy. This morning dawned gray and misty and cool. I really hated to get out of bed, but that isn't unusual by any means. The old sack feels pretty good just before time to get up. There wasn't much doing around the orderly room, my work being pretty well cleaned up for the month. Most of the morning was spent chewing the fat with Sergeant Murphy, Sergeant Castellano, and Corporal Hagen. After lunch, I prepared a couple of allotment forms and had more words with the aforementioned threesome. The mail brought me your V-mail of 9 July. This gave the first intimation that Gloria was in town again. You talk about going in town to see Going My Way at the mast bomb. I'm glad you enjoyed it, baby. It does my heart good to know that you get out occasionally for a good time. I kind of thought you would be impressed with the beauty of the mast bomb theater. We'll be going there someday, I promise you. Going My Way showed at the base here about a month ago, but I think I was on CQ that night and missed it as a consequence. By the way, who is Thelma? You mentioned encountering Shirley's sister and brother-in-law, and you say Shirley and Yale are still in the same place. Where is that? They've moved a few times and I'm all balled up. Please inform, honey. About the flying bombs suite. I've already promised I wouldn't go to London until the danger is entirely past. You may rest assured I'll keep that promise. Please don't give it another thought. I deplore the fact that the lousy Hun was responsible for causing you even a moment's anxiety. Don't make me feel worse by worrying any further about it. I was surprised to learn that the Bennises were in town, but I can't understand their inability to get up to see you. Surely they didn't come all the way from Columbus just to spend a day or so in Philly. And if they were staying any longer, they could certainly spare an hour or two to visit you. As I say, it's all very puzzling. Anyway, I hope you got to see them, and they you. I read all about the fire at the circus, baby, and was as horrified as you must have been. Reading the Stars and Stripes this evening, I came across an item on the tentative plans being made for demobilizations. It appears that they are intending to start demobilizing immediately after Germany has surrendered. The article says that men with children will be given priority over those without children, which is all very encouraging, don't you think? I think I'll enclose the item so you can read it for yourself. All the foregoing brings me up to date, baby, and since it is almost date time, I'll sign off for tonight with all my love for my adored Chippy, her sweet and lovely daughter, and all the Strongans and Pallers. May God keep you all well. Tell Mom I'm very sorry I haven't found the opportunity to write her letter yet, but that I think of her often and mean to as soon as I get the chance. Hasta mañana, carissima. Always, your Phil.